Hola amigos, ¿qué tal? Stuart here from Spain Speaks with an update on the current situation here in Spain. We are currently in day 50 of the lockdown / de-escalation, and I'll have a look at some of the news that caught my attention over the last few days. But firstly, a big thanks to all of the people that left comments on the last video. Plenty of comments on the last video, people debating out the situation. A big thanks to all of the people that decided to support the channel through a small donation. You can see your names there. A big thanks to the people that decided to buy merchandise. And a big shout out to my first 2 patrons on Patreon. Thank you very much for that. You can find links in the description below where you can support the channel, so check those out. Now let's see what's been going on over the last couple of days and get stuck into some news. Now, as we know, yesterday was the first day that people were allowed to go out and practice some type of exercise. People were allowed to go for a surf, to go for a swim, to go for a run, to go for a walk. And after 48 days of confinement, a lot of people decided to get outside and try to do some type of exercise. Also, the weather was fantastic in a lot of areas around Spain. And of course, as we can see from headlines like this, Spain decided to go for a run, causing crowds and panic scenes. In Barcelona, the promenade was full of runners and passers-by who sometimes could not respect the safety distance. The main problems have been found in big cities. Now, one of the main problems yesterday in big cities, especially here in Madrid, was that the main parks weren't open. For example, in the center of Madrid, there's a big park called El Retiro, and yesterday it was closed, which meant that people had to crowd the footpaths or the sidewalks in order to go for a run or a walk. And remember that the majority could only go out yesterday between the hours of 6 and 10, and again later in the evening between 8 and 11. Another headline here said, "Open parks, yes or no? The tide of runners ignites the debate on pedestrian space." And let's be honest, in cities like Madrid, there's not a lot of space. There's not a lot of parks. Of course, you've got the Retiro in the center. There's a few other parks around, but there's not a lot of open spaces. And of course, if the parks are closed, where are people going to go for a run? Where are people going to go for a walk? As we can see here, a picture yesterday from Barcelona, another one here on Twitter from Barcelona. And as we can see that some of these areas were extremely crowded. Another picture here of a beach. I mean, how many people are going surfing at this beach? Would these be the scenes that you see on a normal day? Probably not. But again, after 48 days, people took advantage to practice some type of sporting activity. And with that reduced timetable, obviously it was going to lead to crowds. Now, surely there must have been a better way to do it, especially in some of the big cities. You can't keep people locked up for 48 days and then give them 4 hours of freedom in the morning. If the objective now is to avoid other people and have some type of social distancing, how are you supposed to do it in a city like Madrid or Barcelona? That's the question. I mean, you can do it in other areas where there's not so many people, but these cities here in Spain are extremely crowded. So I wonder if the government made the correct decision on that. What's your opinion? Leave it in the comments section below. Now, the Prime Minister also came out yesterday and said that he wants an extension to the state of alarm, and he warned the opposition that there is no plan B. The state of alarm is a necessity. The Prime Minister stresses that there is no alternative because freedom of movement needs to be controlled to avoid new infections. And remember that it is a measure similar to that of other countries. Is it just me, or does it seem a little bit strange that you allow people to go out and practice exercise in very crowded areas, and then you say that we need to control freedom of movement because we don't want more infections? Seems like a bit of a contradiction to me, but we're in the hands of this government at the moment. Now, the government also assumed the economic collapse and said there will be no recovery until 2022. The government expects a 9.2 recession and a rise in unemployment to 19% this year. It recognizes that in the first semester, the fall in GDP will be 18%. Now, I saw a few people in the comment section on the last video saying that 19% unemployment seems a bit optimistic when other countries around the world are talking about 14 or 15. And given Spain's history of high unemployment, 19% does seem a bit low. Some people estimated that it could be as high as 40%. And the government's cooking the numbers a little bit when it comes to official unemployment rates. But again, we'll have to wait and see. Now, another important piece of information is that as of Monday, the use of masks will be compulsory on public transportation. And we can see here that the government will distribute 14 million masks, 6 million at the main transport hubs, 7 between the municipalities, and 1.5 million to entities such as the Red Cross. So if you're going to be taking public transport as of Monday, whether it's the metro, whether it's the bus, whether it's a train, you're going to have to wear a mask. So if you haven't got one already, you better look for one of these distribution points in order to get one, because otherwise you're not going to be able to take public transport here in Spain. The government yesterday also announced some of the things that we're going to be able to do when stage 1 of this de-escalation plan kicks in, which is going to be on the 11th of March for the majority of places, but there are some places where this is going to take place tomorrow. And as we can see here, the government detailed on Saturday some of the new measures in the face of de-escalation, such as the expansion from 30% to 50%, the maximum occupation of outdoor areas of bars and restaurants once phase 1 is activated. In addition, it will allow gatherings of up to a maximum of 10 people, regardless of whether they are from the same family nucleus or not. Vehicles with up to 9 seats will also be allowed to circulate fully, as long as its occupants live in the same house. According to sources from the executive, all these decisions will be set tomorrow in a ministerial order that will offer the details of considering El Hierro, La Graciosa, La Gomera and Formentera, territories that begin phase 1 on Monday. The rest of the country plans to reach the second stage on May the 11th, as long as there are no spikes in the virus. So there we go. If you're living on one of those islands as of tomorrow, Monday the 4th, but for the rest of the country, it will be May 11th at the earliest. And cities like Madrid and Barcelona probably will be later than May 11. But again, no confirmation on that yet. Now, a question a lot of people have been asking, considering the weather has been so good in the last couple of days, is, can I have a beer at a bar this Monday? And the answer is no, at least not this Monday. During the first phase, phase 0, only the opening of restaurants will be allowed to prepare, collect orders and take them home. As of May the 11th, the opening of terraces with occupancy limitations of up to 50% will be allowed. So from May the 11th, it will be possible to have a beer in a bar, an aperitif, lunch and dinner, enjoying the good spring weather. So there we go. We won't be able to sit outside at a bar and have something to eat or drink until May the 11th in the majority of areas around Spain. Now, one of the vice presidents in Spain, Teresa Rivera, said yesterday that Spain is in the high range of success. Others have recommended drinking bleach. The vice president for the ecological transition regrets that it's difficult to understand that it's important to respond together with this virus. So as we can see here, the government is patting itself on the back, saying that they've done a wonderful job dealing with this crisis. In fact, one of the best countries in the world when it comes to dealing with the situation, and at least they haven't recommended drinking bleach or disinfectant, which apparently some other countries have done. And the vice president for ecological transition. Now that gives you an idea of how Spain works. We have a minister for ecological transition here in Spain, one of the many ministries here in Spain, saying that we need to work together. So there we go. Now let's have a look at some of the comments from the last video. Now the first one here from Gary, he says, "Hi Stuart, I live on the Costa Blanca in Spain. I see some businesses like hairdressers can open on an appointment basis. So does that mean I can take my 84-year-old mother in my car, she lives with me, to the hairdressers for her appointment? Bearing in mind we were instructed that only one person allowed in a vehicle, i.e. the driver." Yeah, that's right, Gary. People will be allowed this week to go to the hairdresser by appointment only. I imagine that in this case, because your mother is 84 years old and you have to take her there, I don't think there's going to be a problem to do that. As long as she sits in the back seat of the car, I don't think there's going to be a problem. And you could always say that you are her carer and that you are taking her to the hairdresser, which is something that she will be allowed to do as of this week. Now, one here from Morris Spooner. What about Menorca, where I am? There are about 1,000 people in our part, but we only have to go out from 6 to 10 or 8 to 11. Why? Well, that's not true. If you live in a municipality with less than 5,000 people, you can go out anytime between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. There are no restrictions for you. There are only restrictions in places where there are more than 5,000 people. So, for example, bigger towns and cities. In this particular area here, 1,000 people, again, anytime between 6 and 11, you're allowed to go out and do whatever you want to do. You're allowed to go for a walk, you're allowed to go for a run, but remember, only once a day. You can't go out in the morning and then again in the afternoon. Only once a day, legally, unfortunately. Another one here from Sarah. "Hi Stuart, thanks for your updates. They're really helpful. We own a house near Malaga in the Campo. We're currently based in Dubai and I planned to move to Spain on a semi-permanent basis 2 months ago. Spain locked down the day before my flight. Of course, I can't leave Dubai until countries allow incoming flights. However, when I can leave Dubai and fly to Madrid, Malaga via England, do you know what restrictions will be in place when I arrive? i.e. will I have to be in quarantine at my house or somewhere else? Thank you for any advice you can provide. Kind regards, Sarah Jessup. Yeah, hi Sarah, thanks for the comment. As far as I know, Spain doesn't have these quarantine restrictions. I know that in countries like Australia, for example, if you go back, you have to spend 14 days in quarantine. I don't think it is the case in Spain. If anybody knows anything different, please leave it in the comment section below. But as far as I know, you can come back here. The only people that have to self-quarantine are people that have symptoms, and it's recommended that they go into a 14-day quarantine as well, but at their homes. So you should be okay when you come back, providing that you don't have the virus. Now another one here from Paolo. Does anyone know when gyms are going to reopen? It seems nobody knows. And Paul also asked the same question, was just wondering if physical exercise includes gyms reopening. Now gyms are going to reopen during one of the phases. Remember that we're in phase 0 at the moment, then we're going to go into phase 1. And as we can see here, answering the question, when can I go to the gym? During phase 2, indoor sports facilities may reopen for activities that do not entail physical contact with others. During phase 3, gyms can open at 30% capacity, although locker rooms will remain closed. So there we go. To be able to use gyms, we're going to have to wait until phase 3. I can't remember exactly when phase 3 is going to kick in. I did mention it a couple of videos ago, so check that out in that video. But as of phase 3, gyms can open with a 30% capacity. Another one here from Silvina. Hi Stuart, thanks so much for your updates. Do you know when flights from England will be allowed to go to the Costa del Sol? Yes, Silvina, no word on this yet. External borders are closed, and I don't know when other countries' borders are going to open as well. As for flights getting back to normal, nobody really knows at the moment. I think there's going to be a lot of internal tourism happening this year. I don't know about external tourism. I know that some countries, I think Germany has recommended people not visit Spain this year, and maybe the UK is going to do something similar. I have no idea, but at the moment, I don't know when flights are going to reopen and if you will be able to visit the Costa del Sol anytime soon. But if something changes, we'll let you know. Another one here from Nate. When will we be able to have more than one person in the car? I'm not hearing anything about having more than one person in your car at once. Can we or can't we? Yeah, Nate, as I mentioned earlier in the video, and as we can see here, starting in phase 1, May 11th at the earliest, or tomorrow in some of the islands, people who live in the same home may also share a car. And I think I said that that car is going to be up to 9 people. So if there are 9 people living in a household here, not very common, but you never know, you will be able to hop in your car with your family members or the people that you live with and travel around your local area or province as of May the 11th in the majority of the country. John says, rules seem to be unnecessarily complicated. Yeah, good point, John. That's the way Spain works, unfortunately. Everything seems to be complicated here. Every rule, every regulation seems to be complicated and difficult to understand. I remember when I was trying to get my residency a few years ago, some of the documents that they sent me were extremely difficult to understand, and you need to go to experts to be able to interpret them. And it's not just for foreign people. Even a lot of Spanish people here have trouble understanding the wording in a lot of these things. There's a lot of ambiguity. There's a lot of grey areas. And even the rules during this de-escalation phase were complicated for a lot of people, and a lot of people just don't understand exactly what they can or can't do. So you're not the only one, John, who thinks that things are unnecessarily complicated, but it just seems to be the way that the government words things here in Spain. Now another one here from Elaine. She says, so we can go for a walk longer than an hour then. Have I got that right? Well, Elaine, no, you can't go for a walk longer than an hour, unfortunately. I'll talk about this in a minute. This is one of those grey areas that I mentioned before. It doesn't seem to be very clear. What's a walk and what's exercise? You're allowed to go for a walk, but not further than 1 kilometre and not longer than an hour, but you're allowed to exercise for as long as you want, as long as you're in the municipality. So if you're just going for a walk or a stroll, let's say, you can't go out for longer than an hour or more than 1 kilometre far from your home. And finally, one here from Harren. They say, what's the difference between walks and sport? I do low intensity cardio, which is quite similar to walking. Does the way you dress determine if you are doing sport or going for a walk? As far as I know, walking equals sport. Yeah, good question, Harren. That's one of the grey areas that I mentioned before, or one of the ambiguities of this whole situation. What's a walk? What's exercise? The Spanish have an expression which is dar un paseo, which is like a relaxed stroll. And a lot of Spanish people like to dar un paseo after lunch, and that's probably what they mean by this. My recommendation would be, as you mentioned here, put on some sports clothes, put on your trainers, put one of those sweatbands around your head there, walk briskly, and you should be able to pass off your walking for exercise. On that note, I'll start to wrap the video up. Questions or comments, please leave them in the section below. I'll let you guys debate the situation out. Tell us about your first day of freedom yesterday if you're living in Spain. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. I'll see you in the next one. Hasta luego. Stay safe.